All right. So the first example that I want to run through with 2.3, after we've gone through the horizontal and vertical parabolas, is something like this. If you were asked to write an equation for a parabola, you're going to need basically two different pieces of information. You're going to need where the vertex is located, and you're going to need either the focus or the directrix. You do not need all three. Okay, and actually you could be given just the focus and the directrix. But what you need to know is you need to have at least two pieces of information. Okay. So the first piece of information that I'm going to give you is where the vertex is. Now, all of the questions right now have to be centered at 0, 0 because we only know how to deal with parabolas that are located at the origin, right? So we know that. But right now that doesn't tell us enough information. So we would need to know where the directrix is, or we would need to know where the focus is to tell us where that parabola is actually opening, right? If we know where the focus is, then that tells us exactly which direction the parabola is going to open. Okay, so let's say that I have a focus point of -3, 0. So I have a focus point of -3, 0. All right. So what I do every time is I just sketch what this graph looks like, so I know which equation to use. Because I know I'm either going to have to use the x equals equation or the y equals equation, one of the two, right? So if I just graph this real quick, and I know that my vertex is going to be at the origin, and then I plot where the focus is, and I just sketch it, I can see that the focus is, where is the focus located again? Inside on the axis, right? Inside the parabola on the axis of symmetry, which means that it's going to open like this. So if it's inside and it's on the axis of symmetry, that means my parabola is going to open to the left. Now, the whole reason that I did this was to let me know that I now have to use the equation x equals 1/4py², because this is a horizontal parabola. Okay? So the whole reason for the sketch is to decide when you are going to use which formula. So if I know to use this formula, I'm good, and I don't really have to do a whole lot more work other than figure out what p is. Okay, so how do I figure out what the value of p is given the information that I have? Is there anything that tells me nicely? It's the x coordinate of the focus, right? Because your two options for the focus were either 0, p or p, 0, depending on which one of the formulas we used, right? Depending on whether we had a vertical or a horizontal parabola, but since this one is horizontal, that means it's going to be in the form of p, 0. So that means my p-value is just -3. So p-value is -3. And now all I have to do is take that p-value and plug it in. And once I plug it in, I've got my equation. So 1/4 times -3 y². So now when I have this, it will end up being x equals -1/12 y². If you put 1/-12, that is fine. If you put 1/-12, that's fine. If you put negative in the front and then you put 1/12, that is fine. It doesn't make a difference at all how you're gonna write that, as long as you have -1/12 somehow. Any questions on this? Any issues on this? Okay, so now we're going to change it a little bit, and I'm actually going to take everything that we just talked about and apply it to when you move the parabola away from the origin. So the parabola at the origin is the easiest way to do this because it doesn't have any extra stuff going on. But what we're going to do is we're going to take that parabola and shift it either left, right, up, or down, and then we're going to revamp all of our little general things that we talked about just a little bit ago. Okay, so this is called standard form at center, vertex. HK. So if you remember back to a little while ago, we talked about H and K, right? H and K is not new. H is still the left, right, K is still the up, down. That is not changing, that is not moving. Nothing about that is going to be different. Almost every time we talked about H, it was the opposite, right? I don't want you to necessarily think that every time here. So H is not always going to be the opposite value like it was before, but it is sometimes. So just make sure that you're paying attention to the general form. You should be okay. We're going to start with vertical just like we did last time. So when we have a vertical parabola, the general form of this parabola is going to be y equals 1 over 4p, which is, again, no different so far, and then x minus h squared plus k. This should look extremely familiar because this is actually vertex form. And if this is in vertex form, then it should be something that you are comfortable with. So you should be able to tell right away where the axis of symmetry is. You should be able to tell right away where the vertex is. So the axis of symmetry is going to be given by h. Now this, I just said h isn't always going to be opposite. This is the scenario where h is going to be the opposite. The next scenario, it's not going to be. Okay, so right here, just make sure that you, I'm going to put x equals h. So this one, h is the opposite value. So again, if h says, or if it says x plus 3, h is negative 3. If it says x minus 7, it's going to be positive 7. Okay, so x is going, or h is going to be the opposite value when you talk about your axis of symmetry. The vertex. This one should be really easy because the vertex is going to be given by the value h comma k. Again, h is opposite. It should be the same exact value as your axis of symmetry value. Okay. So there's the two things that should be straightforward and should be things that you remember. We have our focus point. So if we have our focus point, remember the focus point is on the axis of symmetry. So if the focus point is on the axis of symmetry, that means that the focus point is going to have a coordinate of h comma something. Okay? Because the focus is on the axis of symmetry, and the axis of symmetry was h. So now I'm going to put the other value, which is going to be k plus p. So remember how it used to be 0 comma p? Now since we've moved the focus, we're just taking that p value and shifting it however much k is. So whatever that p value was, if I shifted my graph up 2 units, it's going to be 2 plus p. So I've just shifted that p value up the same way that I would shift everything else. Okay? And the directrix is going to be y equals k minus p. So again, remember how it was negative p for the directrix? Now it is going to be whatever the k value is minus p to shift that same directrix the same way. Okay? So this, what you see on the board right now, is what I'm going to give you in a formula card. Okay? So what you see on the board right now is all I'm going to give you. I'm not going to give you anything else because you should be able to figure out what h is. You should be able to figure out what k is. You should be able to figure out what p is. Those are the things that I'm going to give you. Okay? I'm also going to give you the horizontal information. So we're going to do the same exact thing with horizontal. So we're going to start out with our general form. Just like the centered at the origin, vertical started out y equals, horizontal is going to start out as x equals. And then we are just going to flip every single vertical and horizontal aspect. So all of the x's and y's will switch, all of the h's and k's will switch. So it's going to be x equals 1 over 4p, y minus k squared plus h. So notice, every aspect about it switched. The x switched with the y switched with the x, the h switched with the k, and the k switched with the h. Right? So we have flipped every single one of those aspects. So now what we're going to do is just run our way through all of the important information. For vertical, the axis of symmetry was x equals. Now it's going to be y equals. The axis of symmetry goes this way, right? With horizontal, the axis of symmetry will go horizontal. So that means I need to deal with my k value. So the axis of symmetry is going to be y equals k, and this one is the one that's going to be opposite. Okay? So this one is the one that's going to be the opposite, because it's in the parentheses. Remember how I always said that if something is inside the parentheses, it's going to be opposite? Same thing is going to happen here. So y equals k, k is going to be the opposite. So then I have my vertex. Vertex is still going to be the same. So the vertex will be h comma k. The vertex doesn't flip order though. Like it doesn't flip for k to h. The fact that it's flipped is taken care of in the formula. Okay, so the formula takes care of the fact that it flips. So that's what it does. So now we have our focus point. our focus point. Remember, the focus point is on the axis of symmetry. Yeah.
And the vertex of the H.
Did I call you Will? I did. Sorry, Reagan.
Doesn't matter. Does the H still say opposite?
No, the H is not opposite this time. So the H is only opposite in the vertical one. It is not opposite in the horizontal one. The K is opposite in the horizontal one. It is not opposite in the vertical one.
So, and the vertex of K be opposite though?
Yes. Yep. This K value should match this K value. So these two should be the exact same. Okay. Now again, the focus is on the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is K, so that's the one that's not going to change. So K should be the second coordinate in your axis of, or in your focus point. The one that changes is the x value, because the x value is going to be the one that goes back and forth. So this is actually going to be h plus p. So I'm going to take my focus point and I'm going to shift it left or right, however much my origin shifted, or my vertex shifted. Okay? So then I'm going to look at my directrix. And my directrix is going to be, it is going to be x equals, and then the opposite of this, so h minus p. This is the other thing I'm going to give you. Okay, so I'm going to give this one to you as well. So I'll give you the vertical, I will give you the horizontal of these ones. I will not give you the general form of these where they're centered at the origin. Because if you think about it, you should be able to figure out the equation if this was centered at 0, 0, right? You should be able to figure that out. Because if it's centered at 0, 0, that means you're going to put a 0 here, and you're going to put a 0 here. And if you put zeros in those spots, you are left with x equals 1 over 4p y squared. And that's exactly what you need. Okay? Again, h plus p. If h is 0, this is just p, comma. If k is 0, p, comma 0. You should be able to figure those out, so I'm not going to give you those. Okay? I'm going to give you guys another equation. I want you guys to, or another problem. I want you to try to figure it out without having actually seen me work through a problem before. I want you to try to reason your way through from start to finish how you would figure out if it's vertical, how you would figure out if it's horizontal. If you do figure out that it's vertical or horizontal, how do you figure out what to plug into which equation? So you already know the formulas. What I want you to do is try to figure out how to apply the problem to the formula. Okay, so here's the question. Again, it's going to be the same thing where it's to write an equation of a parabola with vertex at, I want to make sure I give you two different equations. Hang on. Okay, so I want you to write an equation of the parabola that goes through the point, has a vertex of negative 4, 0, and it has a focus of negative 6, comma 0. So I want you to try that. I'll give you a few minutes to try it. So you should be able to figure out, or should be able to see from a sketch where this parabola is going to open. So that's the easiest way to do it. It takes 15 seconds, and it's the easiest way to tell what it's going to do. So I know that there's going to be a point at negative 4, 0. I know there's going to be a point at negative 6, 0. I know that the focus is inside of the parabola, which means that this parabola is going to end up opening like this. Yes?
Could it go the other way?
No. Because remember, the focus has to be inside the parabola.
Yeah, couldn't you use the left point and go that way with that one being inside of it?
You could, except for it tells you that the vertex is this point, and it tells you that the focus is this point. So if it said that the focus was this point and the vertex was this point, yes, I would switch it. But you can't just pick and choose which one you want. You have to use the one that it tells you. Okay? So I know with this equation, I know that it's going to be horizontal, which means that I know it's going to use the equation x equals 1 over 4p y minus k squared plus h. So I know that that's the equation that it's going to use. Now, realistically, the only thing that I have to know is I have to know what the H value is, I have to know what the K value is, and I have to know what the P value is. If I know what the H and the K and the P are, that's the only thing I plug into the equation, right? Once I plug those things into the equation, I'm all done. So right now, from this, I can tell you what H and K are. I know that H is -4, and I know that K is going to be 0, right? And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to figure out what P is. The only thing that has P in it is the focus, right?
Yeah.
The only thing is the focus, which means that the focus is given to us, since the focus is on this point, the focus is given to us by the point H plus P, comma, K. So I know right now I can change this because I already know what H is and I already know what K is. So I can change this and say, oops. So I would say -4. I don't know what P is, so I'm going to keep P the same. And then K would be 0. Now I know from the top part of this equation that the left half of this is going to equal -6, right? I know that those are going to be equal to each other. Because whatever the P value is, it is going to produce the fact that the focus is -6. So I know that this is going to be -4 plus P equals -6. So now I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I get P equals -2. So now that tells me that my P value is -2, and now I have everything that I need to write the equation for this. All right, so let's write the equation. I'm just going to scroll down so I leave that part there so you can see it. But I'm just going to substitute what I know in for what I know. So it's going to be x equals 1/4 times -2. The inside, the K value is going to be opposite, but it doesn't really matter because it's just 0. So it's going to be y minus 0 squared, and then H will not be opposite, so it'll just, be -4. And I'm saying it's not opposite because this value is -4, right? Plus -4 means minus. So when I say plus -4, it means -4, okay? So if I were to put -4 right here, so plus -4. Remember, the H value is not opposite in the horizontal one. The K value is the one that's the opposite. Okay? So now I look at this, and I get x equals -1/8. This is just going to be y because there's absolutely no reason to put y plus or y minus 0. Right? There is absolutely no reason for me to do that. So this equation will just end up looking like this. Okay? So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. Hopefully that's something that you can see. Okay? Any questions on this one that we need to clear up? All right, so let me give you one more that you can try. I want you to see if you can do this one. It's just going to be a little bit different. I'm going to give you different information this time to see if it works out. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit different information. So I'm going to, again, directions are the same, write an equation given the vertex is, let's say, like -1, 4. And the directrix would be, so I'm giving you different information, but it really shouldn't change anything. So this. If I'm giving you the vertex of -1, 4, and I'm giving you a directrix of +1, write an equation given what you have. Now this one's trickier. Promise it's trickier. So give it a couple minutes of effort to see what you can come up with. So we should be able to see that this thing is y equals form from this. So the focus or the directrix is in the form of y equals. Since it's in the form of y equals, that means this is going to be a vertical parabola. So I know that this is going to be in the form of y equals 1/4p times x minus h squared plus k. Again, the parts that I want you to figure out, the things that I need you to figure out are what h is, what k is, and what p is. If you can figure out h, k, and p, you can figure out the equation, right? So I know right away that h is -1, k is 4. So when I'm telling, so that's a really good question, because Ashley's saying, shouldn't this be +1? The reason that I always say the word opposite is because when you get it from here, it would be opposite. Because when I rewrite this, as of right now, I don't have the p-value yet, but when I rewrite this, it's going to be 1/4p, and then it's going to end up being x plus 1, right? Plus 4. So when I say opposite, I mean if you pull it from the equation, you have to write h as the opposite. This is your h value, right? This right here is the h value, this right here is the k value. So a lot of people have a really hard time knowing when something is opposite and when something is not. Okay, that's just something you got to pay attention to. Okay, now I have to find my the p-value, and I know that the p-value is going to be decided from y equals, and then is it k minus p? So it's going to be y equals k minus p. I know that k is 4. I don't know what p is. What is this whole thing equal to? 1. And that 1 comes from here, right? So I know it's going to be, subtract 4 from each side, so I get -p equals -3. So then it's going to be p equals 3, and I can plug that into that value. So my final equation will end up being y equals 1/12 times x plus 1 squared plus 4. If I wanted you to find the focus of this, would that be an easy thing or a hard thing to do? Should be an easy thing, right? Because the focus is just given to us by the point h, comma, k plus p, right? Do I know all of h, k, and p? Is it +3? So it's literally just h, comma, k plus p. So I'm just going to rewrite -1, comma, 4 plus 3. So that means the focus point would be -1, comma 7. Now that is a question that you can kind of expect me to ask you. If I give you the directrix, I might ask you what the focus is. Some of you might be able to figure that out without actually having to do the entire problem. But any questions you guys can think of? Issues, concerns?